It was always dark, and I was always alone on these short walks home from my house, from my friend's house. And even though I was a really young kid, I only lived 2 houses away in a really safe suburban neighborhood. So walking home alone should not have been a big deal. As I shut their front door behind me and started walking, I started by taking really calm, even steps, but within seconds, I could feel the hair on the back of my neck start to stand up, and I just knew there was someone behind me. My heart started racing and forcing my feet to run, and for once, I was grateful I had those long, gangly legs, and I took off through my neighbor's backyard, through the other neighbor's lawn and around the corner. Within seconds, I could see my house, and within a few bounds, I was up the front steps, yanking the front door open and slamming it behind me. And only then did my heart let me stop and breathe and believe that maybe, just maybe, I would live one more day. Now you can probably guess that there was no one behind me, ever. There was no boogeyman in the dark, but the fear that I felt was every bit as real as if there had been. Now we as people tend to look for fear that doesn't exist. We take what should be a casual stroll through our neighbor's grass and turn it into a fight for our lives. We take our emotional pain and we turn it into boogeymen that we need to spend the rest of our lives running from, for fear that if we stop, they will catch up to us and our lives will be over. When in reality, pain can actually be the pathway to peace. Now, I will admit that I was the Olympic gold medalist of emotional running. And since food was my way of running, I ran myself up 127 pounds. You see, I was looking for peace in ice cream, cakes, and cookies on one hand, and diet programs, pills, and promises on the other. Eventually, I realized I was really running on a treadmill that would take me nowhere, no matter how fast I ran. So finally, after 30 years of dieting, binging, I came to realize something. The root of my problem was not food. The root of my problem was fear. And the minute I began to actually work on overcoming my fear, I discovered the most startling realization of my entire life. See, I used to believe that if I could just overcome this war with food, I would find peace. What I have come to understand is that when we find peace, then we are able to overcome our war with food, or alcohol, or drugs, or overworking, or anger, or any of the other paths that we all use to run from the fear in our lives. See, no one likes fear, right? Anybody in here like fear? We hate fear, so we drug it, we drown it, we stuff it down. Or as Brene Brown once said, we take the edge off with a couple of beers and a banana nut muffin. The ways that we run from are endless, but the tendency to run is universal. In 2003, I had the excruciating experience of holding my brother's hand as he died, a very excruciating death from alcoholism. He chose the couple of beers. I chose the banana nut muffin. His way of running and my way of running were really not that different. The only difference that I could see was that my way of running was killing me slower. So, how do we stop running? That's the big question. But before you can figure out how to stop running, you first have to be willing to do the work of finding out, what are you running from? So, what was I running from? Well, I will never forget the day that my parents told my brother and I that they were getting divorced. They sat our tiny little butts down in that green Naugahyde 70s recliner. You remember that one? side by side, and told us they just didn't love each other anymore. And I remember floods of tears just coming down my face, and this incredible panic just arise in me when just moments later I watched my dad drive away. Now, I was 8. I couldn't see that my parents were just trying to protect us from as much of that painful situation as they could by waiting until the very last second to tell us what was happening. So my 8-year-old brain came up with this belief that there must be something terribly wrong with me. Why else would my own dad have been able to leave me? So from that moment on, I actually became like a miniature June Cleaver. I cooked, I cleaned, I drew pictures, I picked flowers, I wrote songs, all in an effort to be perfect, because I didn't want to give my mother or anybody else a reason to leave me. You see, without even realizing it, in those little 8-year-old moments, I created some limiting beliefs or some lies whose pain I would run from for the next 4 decades. You see, in all of my binging and dieting, I hadn't been running from being fat. I had been running from being worthless. I was running from feeling helpless, and that belief that I would never, ever be enough. I was running from that anticipated moment when everybody I loved would finally see behind my facade of perfection and leave me. That's what I was running from. So maybe today, in this room, in this very hall, is the perfect time for you to take a moment and just ask yourself this very important question. What are you running from?